The first contact mission. The shuttle pierced the swirling lavender skies of the alien world, Taruna, its sleek metallic hull reflecting the brilliance of the twin suns. Ambassador Ethan Cole sat inside, gripping the armrests tightly as the unfamiliar sights unfolded around him. This was humanity's first official mission to the XE, a reclusive alien species known for their advanced technology and rigid traditions. Ethan had trained for years for this moment, yet unease churned in his stomach. The XE were infamous for their isolationist policies and mistrust of outsiders. Now he was tasked with bridging the gap between Earth and this enigmatic civilization. As the shuttle descended onto the landing platform, Ethan glimpsed the towering crystalline spires of the XE capital city, Xanaris. The structures shimmered like glass under the amber glow of the setting suns. The sheer beauty of the alien architecture momentarily silenced his nerves. This was more than a diplomatic mission. It was history in the making. The shuttle landed with a soft thud. Ethan took a deep breath, adjusted his formal attire, and stepped onto the platform. A delegation of XE officials awaited him. Their tall, willowy forms were adorned in elegant robes that flowed like liquid metal. Their skin glimmered in shades of opalescent blue, and their almond-shaped eyes sparkled with intelligence and mystery. One of them stepped forward, inclining his head in greeting. "Welcome, Ambassador Cole. I am Soreth, Minister of Interstellar Affairs. On behalf of Her Majesty, Queen Tytriel, I welcome you to Xaruna." Ethan returned the bow. "Thank you, Minister Xoreth. It is an honor to be here and to represent Earth in the hopes of fostering friendship between our peoples." Soreth's expression remained unreadable. "Her Majesty has taken a great risk in allowing this meeting, Ambassador. I trust you will not disappoint her." Ethan nodded, sensing the veiled warning. He followed the delegation into a sleek hover transport, marveling at the alien city. Xanaris was a marvel of engineering, with floating bridges connecting glittering skyscrapers. XE citizens glided through the air on personal anti-gravity platforms, their movements graceful and fluid. It was a world both alien and breathtaking. Inside the transport, Soreth's tone turned sharp. "Know this, Ambassador. Our ways are ancient, and our people do not take kindly to change. Your presence here is controversial." Ethan met the alien's gaze, determined to project confidence. "I understand, Minister. I'm here to listen and to learn. I hope that together we can find common ground." The minister said nothing, but Ethan caught a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. The silence stretched until they arrived at the Grand Palace. Its walls shimmered like frozen starlight, and massive doors opened with a whisper as they entered. The next few days were a whirlwind of formal meetings, cultural tours, and carefully choreographed events. Ethan was impressed by the XE's advanced technology and their disciplined society. Yet, beneath the surface, he sensed unease. Many XE officials barely masked their disdain for him, and whispers of discontent reached his ears. On the fourth night, a lavish banquet was held in his honor. The hall was adorned with floating lights, and an orchestra of unfamiliar instruments played haunting melodies. Ethan felt the weight of scrutiny as XE dignitaries observed him closely. Amid the celebration, he found himself drawn into a conversation with Queen Tytriel. The queen was stunning, her opalescent scales glowing softly under the golden light. Her crown, crafted from translucent crystals, sparkled as she spoke. "You seem out of place, Ambassador," she said, her voice lilting yet sharp. "Earth must value you greatly to send you here." Ethan chuckled nervously. "Perhaps they value my optimism, Your Majesty. I believe even the greatest distances can be bridged with understanding." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly, though her smile remained. "Optimism is a rare trait among my people, Ambassador. I hope it does not betray you." They spoke briefly before the queen excused herself, leaving Ethan to mingle. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being tested, though he wasn't sure how. As the night wore on, Ethan sampled a variety of alien foods and sipped on a peculiar wine that shimmered like liquid silver. It was stronger than he anticipated, and the events of the evening blurred in his mind. Shadows danced in the dimly lit corridors as he made his way back to his quarters, a hazy memory of an encounter lingering just out of reach. Little did he know, this single night would set events into motion that neither he nor the XE could have anticipated. The Queen's Fury. The morning sun of Karuna cast its warm glow across the crystalline palace, but the atmosphere inside was anything but serene. Ethan Cole stood in the grand throne room, his heart pounding as guards flanked him on both sides. The Queen, her shimmering presence commanding the room, glared down at him from her elevated throne. Her scales, glowing with an iridescent sheen, seemed to pulse with anger. Ambassador Cole, Queen Citriel's voice cut through the air like a blade. Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done? Ethan blinked, his mind racing. Your Majesty, I assure you, I'm not sure what you mean. Her eyes narrowed, their crystalline depths filled with a mix of fury and disgust. Not sure. Then allow me to enlighten you. Last night, during the banquet, you disgraced not only yourself, but also the sanctity of this court. And now, her voice trembled with restrained emotion, I find myself carrying your child. Ethan's breath caught. He stared at her, convinced he had misheard. I beg your pardon, Your Majesty. That's impossible. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. Impossible. Are you denying the encounter? The wine, the corridors, the moment you crossed the line no outsider has ever dared approach. She rose, her form towering over him. You, a human, have planted your seed within me. An abomination that defiles both our people. Fragments of memory from the previous night flooded Ethan's mind. The banquet, the wine, the shadows in the corridor. A fleeting, intimate encounter. His pulse raced as realization struck. Your Majesty, he stammered. I had no intention. No knowledge. Silence. Her voice echoed across the chamber, silencing everyone present. Intention is irrelevant. The fact remains that I am with child. A child that could unravel the fabric of our traditions, our society. Do you comprehend the chaos this will unleash? Ethan struggled to form words. This child could be a bridge, Your Majesty. A symbol of unity between our peoples. Her laughter was cold, devoid of humor. Unity? You speak of unity while ignoring the sacred laws that bind my people. This child is not a symbol. It is a curse that threatens my reign, my people's purity. The chamber fell silent. The weight of her words pressed on Ethan like a crushing tide. He glanced at the guards, their expressions as cold and unreadable as the Queen's crystalline crown. His instincts screamed that he needed to tread carefully. Your Majesty, he began, choosing his words with care. I cannot undo what has happened, but perhaps we can turn this situation into something meaningful. This child could represent a future where our peoples coexist. Her piercing gaze bore into him, searching for weakness. And what do you propose, Ambassador? That I rewrite the foundations of my society for the sake of an accident. That I risk my throne, my people, my life for your naive ideals. Ethan held her gaze. I propose we work together to find a way forward. I propose that we choose hope over fear. For a moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, but it was gone as quickly as it came. She turned to the guards. Take him to the dungeons. He will await execution at dawn. What? Ethan's voice cracked with panic. Your Majesty, please, this doesn't have to end in violence. The guards seized him, their grip like iron. As they dragged him away, he shouted, Your Majesty, think of the possibilities. This child could be the key to something greater than either of us. Her back was turned to him as she ascended her throne, her voice icy and final. I have already thought of the possibilities, Ambassador. That is why you must die. In the dungeon, Ethan sat in the dimly lit cell, his mind racing. The shimmering force field that served as the cell door was impenetrable, a testament to the XE's advanced technology. He replayed the events in his mind, searching for some way to make sense of the Queen's reaction. The implications of the pregnancy were staggering. A hybrid child, part human, part XE, was unprecedented. It was an opportunity for unprecedented collaboration, or an excuse for interstellar conflict. Humanity had only just begun to establish itself in the galaxy. A war with the XE could spell disaster. As hours passed, despair threatened to consume him. Then the faint sound of footsteps reached his ears. A shadow appeared beyond the force field, and Ethan tensed. A young XE woman stepped into view. Her lavender scales glowed faintly in the dim light, and her wide, almond-shaped eyes darted nervously. She glanced over her shoulder before whispering, "Ambassador Cole." Ethan stood, hope sparking in his chest. "Yes, that's me. Who are you?" "My name is Aria," she said softly. "I'm a handmaiden to the Queen. I'm here to help you." He narrowed his eyes. "Why would you risk helping me?" Her expression was a mix of fear and determination. "Because this is wrong. The Queen's fear is driving her decisions, but this situation could change everything for the better. I know it, and so do others." "Others?" Ethan stepped closer to the force field. "There are more of you who feel this way." She nodded quickly. "A small group, humans and XE, working together. We believe this child could be a symbol of unity, not division." Ethan's heart pounded with renewed hope. "Then get me out of here. We don't have much time." Aria hesitated before pulling a small device from her robes. She pressed it against the force field, and with a soft hum, it deactivated. "Follow me," she whispered. As they moved through the shadowy corridors, Aria explained, "The Queen's advisors are divided. Some want to use this situation to push her off the throne, while others want to cut off all contact with humanity. We believe there's a way to turn this tide, but it will take careful planning." Ethan nodded, his resolve strengthening. "Then let's get to work. This might be the only chance we have." Ethan followed Aria through the maze-like corridors of the palace, his senses heightened by the danger surrounding them. The dim lighting and seamless, flowing architecture made it difficult to discern where one hallway ended and another began. Aria moved swiftly and silently, clearly familiar with the palace's hidden routes. Ethan stayed close, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. He couldn't shake the Queen's cold words from his mind, or the gravity of the situation he now faced. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at a concealed door hidden behind an ornate tapestry. Aria pressed her hand against a panel, and the door slid open with a whisper. Inside, a group of individuals stood around a glowing holographic display. There were about a dozen of them, a mix of humans and XE, their expressions tense and focused. The room fell silent as Ethan entered, their eyes turning to him. One figure stepped forward, and Ethan's relief was palpable when he recognized Dr. Mara Lynn, the lead biologist from Earth's diplomatic team. "Ethan," Mara said, her voice a mixture of relief and urgency. "Thank goodness you are alive. We've been trying to figure out how to get to you." Ethan embraced her briefly, his mind racing with questions. What's going on? How did things spiral so far out of control? One of the XE, an older male with deep blue scales and a commanding presence, stepped forward. "I am Kaler, Chief Medical Officer to the Royal Court. The situation is unprecedented. There has never been a successful hybridization between XE and another species. It's causing an uproar among the Queen's advisors and the people." Mara added, "Some are claiming it's impossible, accusing us of tampering with XE genetics. Others see it as a threat to their traditions. And then there are those who see an opportunity in the chaos." Ethan frowned. "An opportunity? For what?" Kaler's expression darkened. "To destabilize the Queen's rule. Some of the more conservative factions have long opposed her leadership. They're using this as a pretext to push for her abdication. Others are advocating for a complete severance of ties with humanity." Mara sighed. "And it's worse than that. We've intercepted communications suggesting that certain elements within both XE and Earth's governments are considering preemptive military action. They believe war is inevitable and want to strike first. Ethan felt a cold weight settle in his chest. War? Over this. We're on the brink of discovering something incredible, something that could unite us. Kaler nodded gravely. The Queen's pregnancy is a symbol, whether we like it or not. How that symbol is perceived will determine the future of our worlds. Arya, who had been standing quietly, finally spoke. There's a chance to change the narrative. The Queen may be afraid, but she's not unreasonable. If we can present this child as a symbol of unity rather than a threat, we might sway her. But it won't be easy. Ethan looked around at the group, feeling the surge of determination. What do we need to do? Mara exchanged a glance with Kaler before answering. We've been analyzing the data from the Queen's medical scans. The child isn't just a genetic anomaly. It's something entirely new. Its genetic code is blending traits from both species in ways we've never seen before. It's possible that this child could represent an evolutionary leap for both humans and XE. Kaler added, there's also an old XE legend about a starborn, a being who would unite divided peoples and bring about a new era. It's considered a myth by most, but the parallels are striking. Ethan's mind raced. If we can tie this child to the legend, it could shift public opinion. The Queen might see this as an opportunity instead of a disaster. Arya nodded, but we need to act quickly. The palace is on high alert, and the Queen's advisors are pushing her toward drastic measures. If we wait too long, it might be too late. Mara placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. We need you to speak to her, Ethan. You're the only one who might convince her to reconsider. Ethan hesitated, the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. The stakes were impossibly high. What if she refuses to listen? Kaler's expression was grim. Then we will have to find another way. But if she listens, she could change everything. Ethan straightened his shoulders, determination hardening his resolve. Then let's get to work. Over the next few hours, the group worked tirelessly. Mara and Kaler continued analyzing the medical data, searching for evidence that could support the connection to the Starborn legend. Arya used her position within the palace to gather intelligence and discreetly prepare a meeting with the Queen. Tension filled the air as they raced against time, knowing that every moment brought them closer to the point of no return. Finally, Arya returned with news. The Queen has agreed to meet, but it must be in secret. Her advisors can't know, and we'll have only a brief window. Ethan nodded, his heart pounding. That's all I need. As the group dispersed to finalize their preparations, Ethan stood in the quiet room, gathering his thoughts. The future of two worlds rested on his ability to convince a furious alien queen that the child they had created, against all odds, was not a curse, but a miracle. He had faced challenges before, but nothing like this. He couldn't fail. Ethan followed Arya through the dimly lit corridors, his heart hammering in his chest. The palace felt alive with tension, its shimmering walls reflecting the gravity of the moment. Arya moved with purpose, her lavender scales glowing faintly under the soft light. Every step brought Ethan closer to the Queen, and the daunting challenge of convincing her that her fears could be transformed into hope. The hidden passage led them to a secluded chamber far from the watchful eyes of the palace guards and advisors. The room was modest by royal standards, with walls that gleamed like starlight and furnishings that seemed to hover above the ground. Queen Tytriel sat on a low platform, her form both commanding and vulnerable. She cradled her slightly swollen abdomen, her expression unreadable as her gaze fixed on Ethan. Arya bowed deeply before retreating to the shadows, leaving the two alone. Ethan stood at the threshold, uncertain whether he was about to change the course of history or seal his own fate. "You are bold to stand before me again," Tytriel said, her voice cold and measured. "If this is some attempt to beg for your life, save your breath. My decision has not changed." Ethan took a steadying breath and stepped forward. "Your Majesty, I'm not here to beg. I'm here because I believe there's still a way forward, one that doesn't end in violence. Her eyes narrowed, glinting like shards of ice. You assume much, human. Do you think you can erase what has been done with mere words? Do you think you can undo the chaos you've unleashed upon my people? I don't want to erase it, Ethan replied, his voice firm but calm. I want to embrace it. What's happened is unprecedented, yes, but that doesn't mean it has to be a curse. It could be a gift. Citriel's laugh was sharp and bitter. A gift. This abomination growing inside me is no gift. It is a stain on my rule, a threat to the traditions that have sustained my people for millennia. Ethan took another step forward, his tone softening. Your Majesty, I understand your fear. Change is terrifying, especially when it challenges everything we know. But this child, our child, isn't just a product of chance. It's proof that our species can achieve something extraordinary together. The Queen's grip on her abdomen tightened, her gaze wavering for the first time. You speak as if you understand my people, my burden. But you know nothing of what it means to lead, to uphold the laws that define us. I may not understand fully, Ethan admitted, but I know what it means to face the unknown. Humanity has faced countless challenges, and each time we've grown stronger because we chose to adapt rather than cling to the past. Citriel's expression hardened again, but there was a flicker of something else. Doubt, perhaps. Ethan pressed on, his words carrying the weight of his conviction. Your Majesty, Kaler has been studying the child's development. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. This child isn't just a blend of our species. It's something new, something greater. It could possess abilities that neither humans nor Xe have ever imagined. Her eyes flicked to him, wary but curious. Abilities? What do you mean? Ethan leaned forward slightly, sensing an opening. Enhanced neural activity, accelerated healing, and possibly even traits we can't yet comprehend. This child could represent an evolutionary leap for both our species. And more than that, it could be the bridge that unites us. The Queen's voice wavered, despite her attempt to keep it steady. You speak of unity, yet you forget the laws that bind my people. A child of mixed blood is an affront to everything we hold sacred. Ethan met her gaze, his voice resolute. Laws can be rewritten. Traditions can evolve. But only if leaders like you have the courage to make it happen. Your Majesty, this child doesn't have to be a threat. It can be a symbol, a living testament to the strength that comes from embracing the unknown. Silence hung in the air, the weight of Ethan's words pressing down on both of them. Citriel's expression softened imperceptibly, her hand resting protectively on her abdomen. For a moment, Ethan dared to hope that she might see the truth in his words. But the Queen's voice, when she spoke, was laced with anguish. Even if I were to accept this child, my people would not. They would see me as weak, unfit to rule. They would demand my abdication. Ethan took another step closer, his voice filled with urgency. Then show them your strength, your Majesty. Show them that leadership isn't about clinging to the past. It's about guiding your people into the future. You have the power to shape what comes next, to turn this moment into a triumph rather than a tragedy. Her eyes glistened with unused tears, and for the first time, her mask of stoicism cracked. You speak of triumph, yet I see only despair. How can I convince my people when I am not even certain of my own heart? Ethan hesitated, then spoke with quiet conviction. By trusting in the possibility of something greater, this child isn't just a challenge, Your Majesty. It's a chance for us to show the galaxy what can happen when we choose hope over fear. The room fell silent again. The Queen's internal struggle etched across her face. Finally, she closed her eyes, her shoulders sagging as if the weight of her burden had finally become too much to bear. I will consider your words, Ambassador, she said at last, her tone weary but less hostile. But know this, if you are wrong, it will not only be my throne that falls, it will be the fragile peace between our worlds. Ethan nodded, the faintest glimmer of hope sparking within him. That's a risk I'm willing to take, Your Majesty, because I believe this child is worth it. Citriel said nothing more, and Arya appeared silently at Ethan's side to lead him away. As they disappeared into the shadows, Ethan felt both relief and a growing sense of responsibility. The Queen had not yet embraced the path forward, but the seed of possibility had been planted. Now, all they could do was nurture it and hope it would grow. Ethan returned to the hidden chamber where his allies awaited him, his mind still reeling from the tenuous progress he had made with Queen Citriel. The tension in the room was palpable as the group looked up at him, their expressions a mix of hope and dread. Mara was the first to speak, her voice tight with urgency. How did it go? Did she listen? Ethan exhaled slowly, leaning against the edge of the holographic table that dominated the room. She's not ready to commit, but she's willing to consider the possibilities. It's a start, but it's far from a guarantee. Kaler, the XE Chief Medical Officer, stepped forward. His deep blue scales shimmered faintly under the glow of the holographic display. If she is even considering another course of action, that is progress. But we must act quickly. The factions pushing for her abdication are growing bolder. Arya, standing near the door, nodded in agreement. The palace is rife with whispers. Some of the Queen's closest advisors are aligning themselves with the conservatives. If they sense any hesitation in her leadership, they'll move to depose her. Ethan straightened, his determination solidifying. Then we need to shift the narrative. We have to show the Queen and her people that this child is not a threat, but a promise of a brighter future. Kaler, have you made any progress on connecting the child's development to the legend of the Starborn? Kaler nodded, gesturing to the holographic display. A series of glowing images and data streams appeared, highlighting the unique genetic markers and neurological anomalies observed in the fetus. The child's genetic makeup is unlike anything we've seen. It possesses traits that are not merely a combination of human and XE DNA, but something entirely new. Its neural activity suggests capabilities far beyond our understanding. These findings align with the ancient texts describing the Starborn, a being destined to unite divided peoples and bring about a new era. Mara chimed in, her excitement barely contained. We've also found references in XE mythology that could be interpreted as foretelling this very moment. The timing, the unique traits of the child, it all fits. If we present this information carefully, it could sway public opinion. Ethan frowned, crossing his arms. Carefully is the key word. If we push too hard, it could backfire. The conservatives will use any perceived manipulation as proof that this is a human ploy to destabilize their society. Kaler's expression darkened. Then we must act with precision. The Queen's advisors won't be easily convinced, but if the Queen herself accepts this narrative, she has the authority to challenge them. Arya spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. We can't forget the human side of this equation. Earth's fleet is mobilizing, and if they perceive any threat to the ambassador's safety, or if they believe the XE are preparing for war, they won't wait for diplomacy to play out. Mara looked to Ethan, her concern evident. That means we need to secure a message to Earth. They need to know that progress is being made, or this situation could spiral out of control. Ethan nodded, his mind racing. We'll need a way to communicate without drawing attention. Arya, can you get a secure message to the human delegation? She hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the door. It won't be easy. The palace is under strict surveillance, and any unauthorized communication could be intercepted. But I'll try. Kaler stepped closer, his expression grim. We also need to prepare for the worst. If the Queen is overthrown or refuses to act, the conservatives will use this child as an excuse to cut all ties with humanity, or worse, declare war. Ethan's jaw tightened. We can't let that happen. We have to keep pushing forward, no matter the risks. The room fell silent as the weight of their task settled over them. Each member of the group understood the stakes. They weren't just fighting to save a single life or prevent a political crisis. They were fighting to redefine the relationship between two worlds. Arya broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll start working on securing the message. In the meantime, you should prepare for another audience with the Queen. If she's wavering, we need to make our case stronger. Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. Do whatever you need to. We don't have much time. As the group dispersed to their tasks, Ethan found himself alone for the first time since his imprisonment. He paced the small chamber, his thoughts racing. The Queen's hesitation was both a blessing and a curse. It gave them a chance, but it also left them vulnerable to the growing opposition within the palace. He thought of the child, the impossibility of its existence, and the potential it represented. It wasn't just a life, it was a bridge, a symbol of what humanity and the XE could achieve together. But that symbol would mean nothing if fear and prejudice prevailed. Ethan closed his eyes, drawing in a steadying breath. He had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. The stakes were higher, the risks greater. Yet despite the fear gnawing at the edges of his resolve, he knew he couldn't back down. The fate of two worlds depended on it. The following evening, Ethan found himself summoned once more to the Queen's private chambers. The message had been delivered with urgency, carried by one of Arya's trusted allies within the palace. The request for his presence gave him hope, but it also stoked the flames of anxiety. He knew time was running out, and the Queen's decision could determine not only his fate, but the future of humanity's relationship with the XE. The room was dimly lit, with a faint glow emanating from the crystalline walls. Queen Tytriel sat on a low divan, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. She looked every bit the ruler she was, her shimmering scales and crystalline crown catching the soft light. Ethan took a cautious step forward, bowing his head in respect. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice steady but low. "You requested my presence." She studied him for a moment, her piercing eyes seeming to evaluate his very soul. Finally, she spoke, her tone measured. "Ambassador, I have given thought to your words. You speak with conviction, but conviction alone does not alter the reality of my situation." Ethan straightened, meeting her gaze. "Your Majesty, I understand your hesitation. Change is never easy, especially when it challenges traditions and beliefs. But I also know that this moment, this child, is an opportunity that may never come again." She leaned back slightly, her expression softening just enough to reveal the weight of her internal struggle. "You speak as if this child is a gift. My people see it as a curse. If I embrace it, I risk losing everything I have worked to protect." Ethan stepped closer, his voice quiet yet insistent. "You wouldn't be losing, Your Majesty. You would be leading your people into a new era, one where the XE are not bound by fear of the unknown, but are guided by the strength to embrace it." Her gaze flickered, uncertainty momentarily replacing her steely resolve. "You place a great deal of faith in the unknown, Ambassador. But faith alone cannot quell the discontent brewing within my court." Ethan took a steadying breath. "Then let's turn the unknown into something tangible. Kaler's research has shown that this child isn't merely a blend of human and XE traits. It's something entirely new, a being with potential beyond anything we've seen. Your Majesty, this child could redefine what it means to be XE and human." The Queen's hand rested on her abdomen, her expression softening further. "And if my people reject this potential? If they reject me?" Ethan's voice grew more passionate, his words fueled by a mix of hope and desperation. "Then show them the courage to rise above their fear. You have the power to set an example, to guide your people toward a future that embraces unity over division. If you don't, the factions that oppose you will use this child as a weapon against you and against humanity." Tytriel closed her eyes, her silence stretching on for what felt like an eternity. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, almost a whisper. "There is an ancient legend among my people. It speaks of a starborn, an extraordinary being who would bring harmony to our divided worlds. For centuries, it has been dismissed as a myth. Yet, This child embodies traits that align with the legend in ways I cannot ignore. Ethan seized on her words, his heart racing. Your Majesty, legends often hold truths that transcend time. This child could be the realization of that prophecy. If we present it as such, it could shift the narrative. It could give your people a reason to see this not as a curse, but as a blessing. The Queen's eyes opened, filled with a mixture of fear and determination. And what of your people, Ambassador? Will they accept such a union? Or will they see it as an affront to their own beliefs? Ethan hesitated, knowing the truth was complicated. There will be resistance, just as there is among the XE. But humanity has always found strength and adaptation in facing challenges head-on. This child could be the symbol that pushes both our peoples to rise above their differences. For the first time, the faintest hint of a smile touched her lips. You speak with great passion, Ambassador, perhaps too much for your own good. He allowed himself a small smile in return. Passion is what brought me here, Your Majesty. It's what drives me to believe that this moment, this child, can be the beginning of something incredible. She fell silent again, her gaze distant as she considered his words. When she finally spoke, her voice was firmer, more resolute. If I am to embrace this child as a symbol of unity, I will need more than words. I will need evidence, allies, and a plan to sway my people. Ethan nodded. You'll have all of that and more. Kaler and Mara are working tirelessly to gather the data we need to present to your court. And there are those within your own ranks, like Arya, who believe in this cause and are ready to support you. Citriel's gaze sharpened, her royal demeanor returning. Then you and your allies have much work to do, Ambassador. The forces aligned against us will not wait idly while we prepare. Ethan inclined his head. We'll be ready, Your Majesty. As Arya reappeared to escort Ethan back to the hidden chamber, he felt a spark of hope ignite within him. Queen Citriel had not yet fully committed to their cause, but she had opened the door to the possibility of change. It was a fragile beginning, but it was enough. For the first time since the crisis began, Ethan felt that unity was within reach. As dawn approached, the palace was alive with an undercurrent of unease. Whispers of rebellion echoed through its halls, and the tension was palpable. Ethan, Mara, and their allies worked tirelessly in the hidden chamber, finalizing their plan to present the child as a symbol of hope and unity. The Queen's fragile willingness to consider change had given them a narrow window to act, but the forces opposing them were mobilizing rapidly. Kaler stood over the holographic display, his expression grim but determined. The genetic and neurological data we've gathered is compelling. This child is not just a biological anomaly. It is something unprecedented. If presented correctly, it could sway even the staunchest conservatives. Mara nodded, her focus sharp as she organized the presentation they would deliver to the Queen's court. We've aligned the child's traits with the Starborn legend, emphasizing the parallels in XE mythology. If the Queen supports this narrative, it could turn the tide. Ethan paced the room, his thoughts racing. It's not just the data we need to focus on. The presentation has to connect with the people on an emotional level. Facts alone won't overcome centuries of tradition and fear. Arya, standing near the entrance, added softly, "The Queen's voice carries great weight. If she speaks with conviction, her people will listen, but she must believe it herself." Ethan stopped pacing and turned to the group. "Then we have to ensure she does. This isn't just about convincing the court. It's about giving the Queen the courage to lead." The plan was simple in concept, but fraught with risks. Arya had arranged for a private meeting between the Queen and key members of her court, where the evidence and arguments would be presented. The goal was to win over the moderates and weaken the conservatives' influence. If they succeeded, the Queen could announce her support for the child as a symbol of unity. If they failed, it would likely mean war. As the hour of the meeting approached, Ethan and Mara accompanied Arya to the Queen's chambers. Citriel was already waiting, her posture regal but tense. Her gaze swept over them, lingering on Ethan. You bring me the tools to sway my people, she said, her voice steady but laced with apprehension. But the question remains, do I have the strength to wield them? Ethan stepped forward, his tone firm but encouraging. Your Majesty, strength isn't about being unshaken. It's about standing firm even when the ground beneath you feels unstable. You have the power to guide your people into a new era. All you need to do is take the first step. The Queen regarded him for a long moment before nodding. Then let us see if this path leads to salvation or ruin. The court meeting was held in a grand hall, its crystalline walls shimmering with light that seemed to pulse with the emotions of the gathered XE officials. The air was thick with tension as Queen Citriel entered, flanked by Ethan, Mara, and Kaler. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, the mix of curiosity, suspicion, and defiance palpable. Citriel ascended the dais, her gaze sweeping over the assembled officials. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of her authority and the vulnerability of her uncertainty. My people, we gather here in a time of great upheaval, she began. The events of recent days have challenged our beliefs and traditions. They have forced us to confront truths we have long considered immutable. She gestured toward Kaler, who activated the holographic display. Images and data filled the air, illustrating the child's unique genetic makeup and its alignment with the Starborn legend. Kaler spoke with measured confidence, explaining the unprecedented nature of the child and its potential to represent the unity of two worlds. The room buzzed with murmurs, both intrigued and skeptical. Citriel raised a hand, silencing the crowd. This child, born of an impossible union, is not a curse. It is a symbol, a beacon of what we can achieve when we move beyond fear and embrace the unknown. One of the conservative advisors stepped forward, his tone sharp and accusatory. Your Majesty, this child is an abomination. It defies our sacred laws and threatens the purity of our people. How can you ask us to accept such a thing? Citriel's gaze hardened, her voice unwavering. I ask you to consider not what we stand to lose, but what we stand to gain. Our traditions have guided us for millennia, but the universe is vast and ever-changing. If we do not adapt, we risk stagnation and extinction. Ethan stepped forward, addressing the crowd directly. I am human, and I know what it is to fear change, but I also know that our greatest strength lies in our ability to overcome that fear. This child is not just XE or human, it is the future, a future where our species can stand together, stronger than ever before. The room fell silent, the weight of their words settling over the assembly. Slowly, a few of the more moderate advisors began to nod, their expressions thoughtful. The tide was shifting, but the conservatives were not ready to relent. You gamble with our survival, Your Majesty, another advisor said, his voice cold. If you continue down this path, you will lead us to ruin. Citriel stepped forward, her presence commanding. No, Minister. I am leading us toward a future where we are not defined by our fears but by our courage. This child will not be hidden or condemned. It will be celebrated as a symbol of what we can achieve together. Her word hung in the air, and slowly, one by one, the room began to shift. The murmur of dissent quieted, replaced by a cautious but growing acceptance. The Queen's courage had lit a spark, and for the first time, hope began to take root. As the meeting concluded, Citriel turned to Ethan, her expression a mixture of gratitude and resolve. Your faith in this cause has given me the strength to act. Now we must ensure that this fragile unity endures. Ethan nodded, relief and determination flooding through him. We will, Your Majesty. Together, we'll build a future where this child and our peoples can thrive. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, the path ahead seemed clear. Two worlds, once divided, were beginning to unite. And at the heart of it all was a child who embodied the limitless potential of hope and courage.